We are live again, folks. You thought this was going to be the last interview. Turns out we found one more person. And you know what they say, Kanyon, that you always save the best for last. Isn't that right?
But of course.
So, Kanyon, in the Coyote Woman, who are you? What are you doing? What's your mission? Oh, is that why they call you the Coyote Woman?
Partially. I do talk to coyotes. So
you talk to coyotes?
Yes, I do.
Can you tell them not to eat my cats and dogs?
Well, have you been giving them space? Have you been respecting the environment and not invading their territories?
Yes. Well, I guess I can't. It depends on how you look at it.
Urban industrial sprawl is kind of encompassing their home stretch.
I'm out in the farm area.
Ooh.
And we do have property, and they come in our property. But can I say it's my property, or is it theirs?
Right.
Wait, well, what if I was there before they were born?
Ooh.
Is that my property?
But what about their great-greats?
True.
Their ancestral lineage. What I do know is there are.
What about my dog though?
Canines are bred to be domestic, and they're meant to be our subservient partners and buddies and friends and babies and family, of which there's a whole nother lineage of curiosities of why we do what we do.
Right.
But of course, well, let me give you a formal introduction of myself. Mishmin Tuhis, Kanrakat Kanyon, Coyote Woman from Indian Canyon Nation. I just introduced myself in the Mutsun language, the language of my ancestors, the language that is known to San Benito County, good portion of Watsonville, parts of Gilroy, into the southern region, and a little bit of north of Monterey County. And that is the language of my ancestors that has been spoken before English, before Spanish, that is recognized as the indigenous language of that particular land. Right now, we're in San Francisco. The first language here is Ramaytush. Can you say that word? Ramaytush?
Ramaytush.
Yeah. And there's a village site known as Yalamu. Yalamu?
Yalamu.
Nice. You just said two indigenous words that happen to be native to this land before colonization.
Ramaytush
and Yalamu. Right here, local here.
Okay.
And that's what I am focused on currently, is raising awareness of the importance of land acknowledgements and becoming familiar with, well, it's called Indigenous protocol. It's more of kind of like an etiquette. You know how, what would you do if you wanted to go to your neighbor's house and borrow a cup of sugar? Would you walk into their kitchen?
No.
You'd probably knock
on the door.
Exactly. And that's a common etiquette, kind of like a protocol of what we do in today's society.
Right.
Indigenous peoples have many protocols that are inherently present within our dominant society. So it's a way of respecting other people's territory and asking permission to be there.
Yeah.
And so in today's post-colonial settler society, when we have this industrialization and urban sprawls and colonial mindset of resource grabbing and kind of desecrating the sacred, Native people still have that respectful indigenous protocol, and it means to be familiar with the indigenous people and history of these spaces and places that we occupy.
Okay.
And so it's important that we recognize this because, well, the narrative about indigenous peoples is orally presented. You've probably read in books that if you're from this area, the Ohlone people once were here. That verbiage is contributing to paper genocide. That verbiage is contributing to cultural genocide just by saying were.
Because they're still here.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. That verbiage is incorrect, and that literally oppresses an entire group of people by just being negligent of them. And it's frustrating because in some of the history books we read the indigenous people or the Native people were hunter-gatherers. It makes us sound like hand-in-mouth survivalists and Neanderthals. When
we all were hunter-gatherers back in the day.
Exactly. All of us have indigenous roots to many territories. And it's that earth-based spirituality is where we have that inherent responsibility to our environments, to our communities, and to the next generation. That we have to realize how our actions and words impact those going forward. And it really means that we need to have that reciprocal relationship with our environment. And when we think about that, we probably wouldn't be doing some of these atrocious crimes against nature, crimes against humanity, and crimes against indigenous peoples, because it's an exploitive model. This capitalist society is imbalanced, and it's at its current rate. I'm happy to see there are people that are kind of waking up and coming to realizing, oh, if we help these indigenous communities, if we actually bring in some of those practices, recognize, like I just got in a conversation with someone who talks about holistic health. I was like, nice, bringing that in as a mainstream approach. I appreciate it. We need the variant, multiple perspectives to go forward for solution building and opportunities.
Right. Well, so Kanyon, I mean, what do you suggest? I mean, what is an idealistic civilization for you? I mean, obviously, you know, you would like to keep those cultural norms, but as society advances around you, it's hard to ignore those changes. I mean, what do you suggest? Or like, well, you know, what's the idealistic civilization for Kanyon?
Well, to me, it would mean that we want to have a level playing field. Truth in history is honored and regarded as fact. That means we have to have some difficult conversations. We have to come face to face with some really hard things. We need to recognize and realize a lot of atrocious crimes have been committed against many nations. Many of our peoples have been indentured slaves. Many of our peoples have been oppressed. Women are still being oppressed. And we need to bring that up to the top and have a level playing field, everyone educated. And just all of the lands need to be acknowledged with their original histories, because I really believe that when we recognize the indigenous peoples of whose land we are on, in any place that we go, we can glean insight to the solutions towards the future. Because, well, Native peoples have been stewards of the land for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. The first environmentalist, the first ecologist, the first land manager who cultivated a relationship with fire, burning the land to ensure that the roughage would burn out, the trees would have a healthy crop, harvesting in an integral fashion, multicultural, and we don't have a monolithic culture, and we don't have a monolithic method of agriculture. And stewarding the lands doesn't mean row crops. It means diversify. It means respect all of those life systems, and it has an integral responsibility to them. I am an omnivore. I love meat and I love plants, but I know that I need to take a life to sustain my own. And when I humble myself, recognize that I appreciate the life that is lived and the gift that is given, that I have an inherent responsibility to understand what goes into those foods, how they came to me, and appreciate everything that came around that. Meaning, thankful to those who cooked it, who provided it, the environment that I'm in, as well as the sources and the sourcing and what goes into the sourcing. Meaning, if people are taking advantage of other people, slaves, child slavery, or just exploitive models, I don't want to support that, because I'm bringing that into my body. And if we all started becoming more conscious about that, we would have a strong relationship with our environment and know that our next generations are safe. Our next generations appreciate what we are enjoying, that we won't have to worry about how bad and poorly we affect the environment, that we are endangering many species, that we're hindering the limited resources, and we're seeing the environment as a resource and an asset that is to be capitalized off of, when we should go back to our indigenous modalities. All of us come from indigenous communities, earth-based spiritual spaces, stewards of the land, because it happened before colonization, like the witch burnings. Those were earth-based spiritualities and ways that my relations of the eastern regions and European roots engaged in their environment. Pictish, Gaelic, all of these amazing beings that are reconnecting and awakening their ancestral knowledge. Yeah, of course, we can't go back. I understand that. And we can't give back everything and be like, oh, sorry, it happened. But we can witness what it took to have that responsibility to walk forward with integrity and have that just that mindset going forward, because that's where the solutions are. By honoring the past, we can shape the future. And that starts with acknowledging truth in history. And it means we need to have cultural sensitivity courses. It means we have to have some difficult conversations. It means there won't be an industrial model to follow. It means that it's going to be regional. It means that we have to talk and engage and have means of reconciliation and agreements going forward that things will change on a big level, and that it's going to be challenging, because it actually means that we're responsible for our own selves instead of going to some corporate entity or going to some policy change maker or going to some leader and saying, you need to help us, you need to correct us. No, we don't put the responsibility on the leader. We have to be accountable for our own actions.
Definitely. And Kanyon, very well said. And the thing is it's, well, first, to go off your point, we can always learn from our history and our past.
Exactly.
That's completely true. Why shouldn't we?
To make sure we don't repeat mistakes.
Exactly.
And also take some ideas like, oh wow, that worked really good. So maybe we should do something like that.
And the thing is I interviewed somebody today who's actually using an app to line out properties and help people, and to help the 70 million people who have their homes taken away from governments, to outline their property and provide evidence that they have lived in this land before, that they have crops here. So this stuff is still going on today around the entire world, not so much in the United States anymore, but it is still going on today, and it's an important issue. And so it's definitely something to think about. And then to go to your other point, it is interesting. We should learn from our history. You said it first, we can't go back. But if you do look at it, and they do, at least I was taught in my AP United States history course, that the indigenous people, it's not even close to what white folks did to them back in the day in terms of their genocide.
Exactly.
It's like millions. It's not even pennies on the dollar compared to what happened in Germany.
And it was all off of colonization and capitalist gain. To eradicate the California natives for the gold rush, the U.S. government put out a bond, $1.4 million, $5 a head, 50 cents a scalp. Yet to this day, these children don't even know, or people have the conversation of, oh yeah, you Indian scalp people. Hold up, wait a minute, how do you prove you got yourself a native?
Yeah.
You scalp them. So that's incorrect history being presented to the next generation, of which stereotypes and assumptions are prevalent, and they are hindering the way we are. The same thing with our third gender. Indigenous peoples have third genders, sometimes even 5, 10 genders. And we need to recognize that all people are respected with integrity. Yeah. And we engage in a consent culture rather than an assumptive, presumptive, exploitive model of you're wrong because my religion says so.
Yeah, I would agree. And there's so many different ways you can look at that, and so many different genders, race. Yep. It goes on today, and I think the thing you can do is just be kind to people and respect them for what they have, empathy for people. Yep. And it's very simple. And but off of that, I want to say, you're very passionate about this subject. Obviously, it's got you to the place you are today. You're speaking at the conference, and you're having your message heard.
Yes.
What advice would you give to somebody who might have the same passion for something that they enjoy?
Be true to yourself and always listen, because the more you listen, the more you get a chance to observe. You'll be able to witness the various perspectives, of which you then can come to a stronger formula of resolution building. Because when you hear more perspectives, you then get a chance to understand something in depth. And I tie this into colonization of, think about Australia. When the ships came to Australia, there was an invasive species. It was the rats. The rats started taking over the native populace of all the other animals. And the colonizers were like, oh no, we need to fix this. Oh, we know a predator of the rat could be a reptile. Okay, let's go get the reptile, bring it here, and we'll get rid of the rats and we'll solve our issue. Well, guess what? They didn't study it. They didn't acknowledge it. They didn't know anything about the ecological impact of this next predator. They bring a predator back over, and it was too diverse. One was nocturnal and one was during the day. So now you've brought 2 invasive predators impacting the indigenous species, the native animals and the native plants, of which devastated the native population of the plants and the animals mainly. And that was to make a solution. That was a reactive solution opportunity. That was an outsider looking in, trying to glaze over, saying, I know what's right, I'm going to do this without considering impact.
Do some more research before
observe, learn the history of the space and place. Like when it comes to some of the fires in California, had some people talk to some indigenous nations, they probably would have realized that there is a name for a western wind, a name for that valley that burns, and a name for the flood that comes after. And they would learn that that area was not to be cultivated for living, people living and inhabiting on a permanent basis, because those things happen on a reoccurring basis.
Interesting.
And had people consulted with indigenous peoples, they would have realized there are different occurrences that happen in those spaces for a reason.
So going forward, if you're dealing with an issue that involves land, maybe reach out to indigenous culture and learn from them, and become friends and have a mutual understanding. Start a relationship. Interesting. Consult, engage, and have forward momentum in solution building.
I really believe that it's Indigenous pedagogies, Indigenous involvement and collaboration that will lead to solutions towards the future. And that means we all need to become familiar with the Native nations who were here first, stewards of the land, and how we can come together to build solutions for the future. So I'm all about connecting, collaborating, and just witnessing truth and history. And it means hard conversations, but it also means beautiful connections.
Well, I'm glad we had this conversation today, Kanyon. Thanks for coming on the show.
Appreciate it.
Any last words that you have for our audience out there in terms of where they can find more information?
Well, I am of the Indian Kanyon Mutsun band of Costanoan and Ohlone people. I happen to live in Ohlone Territory. We are in San Francisco Bay. Ohlone Territory is between San Francisco and Monterey. 8 different languages, different nations within there. It just starts a conversation. I am of Kanyon Konsulting. I'm in a little LLC. I'm a CEO of Kanyon Konsulting. If it wants to be my friend, haha, shiny, shiny. I am CoyoteWoman. I am an artist. I'm on a lot of social media sites, from Twitter to Facebook to Instagram, but I'm the only Kanyon with a K, CoyoteWoman.
Well, that wraps up for CoyoteWoman. I'm your host, Kevin Edwards. Thanks for tuning in today to the RealLeaders podcast. And the last one, saved the best for last year. With my friend CoyoteWoman.
Right? I'm like, what?
Take care, people. Thanks for tuning in. Always keep it real.